Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vintage Super League. I'm Luis Scott Vargas here with Dr. Rich Shea, who recently joined the ranks of, I guess, the other doctors.
Well, yes, other doctors are doctors. That's true. I just got my doctorate from Carnegie Mellon yesterday in the School of Computer Science. Involved writing a 162-page dissertation. Um, it's about passwords. I've looked at and studied more about passwords than anyone ever should have to. The long and the short is don't use fewer than 12 characters and don't use all of one character class. And try to start and end your password with a lowercase letter, but sprinkle some non-lowercase letters in the middle.
And where does writing your password on sticky notes and putting it next to your computer rank in terms of security?
It's not the most secure thing you could do, but it's actually not as bad as reusing your password everywhere. So if you had to pick one, you're actually better off with a bunch of sticky notes. I actually
Yeah,
have I have a Rolodex of my passwords written down behind me, in fact, on paper. And my thought is that if you break into my apartment, you can do a lot worse than get my passwords.
right.
And
And most people who are looking to log on to your online accounts are not people anywhere near you. I mean, they're people presumably, anywhere.
right, they could be anywhere. And the number of people that are actually physically proximate to you is low. One of the ways that you can use that to your advantage is using something called two-factor authentication. So Google has this, Microsoft has this, more and more places do this, where if you have a password, in addition to your password, they'll send a text to your phone. So if you're authenticating on a new device, you have to enter your password as well as the code that got sent to your phone. So now if a bad guy wants to break into your account, then he needs not only to have your password, but also to have your phone. And that becomes much more difficult.
Yeah, and I use two-factor authentication on a number of things, but I guess I mean, I don't know how much you deal with in terms of management of like time too. Like because I mean, if someone has 27 passwords, they have to balance security and time, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's no good just having a strong password because at the end of the day, you could generate a 128-bit random key, and that's a strong password, but you'll never remember it. And so, password strength has to be balanced against usability. So, um, when I had tens of thousands of people, when our password group had tens of thousands of people making passwords under different conditions. We asked them to create the passwords, recall the passwords after a little bit, and then after a few days. And then we would ask them to rate how difficult the experience was, how annoying the experience was. We looked at how quickly they entered their password. We asked whether they wrote it down. We detected if they were pasting it or typing it. And what this all led to is that some of the things we looked at, some of the password policies we looked at, were great for security, terrible for usability. So that's absolutely a factor. Yes.
All right. Well, it's you made, as someone said in the chat, you made passwords sound very interesting, and I'm sure you find them interesting given that you spent presumably a lot of your life on it. But we're getting
Yes.
the match set up now. We've got a Kai against Ifro. We've got new decks this week, and
I'm looking forward to this.
are you playing? You're not playing either of them. Or no, are you playing either of them in this next 3 weeks?
I am playing Ifra.
Okay. I'm curious what you thought Ifro was going to be playing, and obviously don't reveal your deck, because you haven't played yet. But I'm curious if you had any assumptions about what was going to play.
I didn't. I'll tell you, I found it extremely hard to figure out what people were going to play. I think that Workshop and Oath are both decks that I've built in preparation for, but that could be completely wrong. I think they both would have been very solid choices for the past round. Um, I think, as they were saying, Nalrod would have been a very solid choice for this past round. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them, but I'm really not sure what to expect.
Yeah, I think most people have a pretty wide range here. I've been, there's someone like Steven, who I actually am playing tonight, who I don't think he's going to play Delver necessarily because he did play Doomsday, but I would say he's more likely to play Delver than any other deck individually based on how many times he's played that deck.
Mhm.
So you have something like that where you have like partial information, but they also know you have this information. Like
Right. Becomes a leveling game, doesn't it?
exactly. And so it sounds like the match is ready. So we're gonna find out
Well,
shortly what these guys are playing.
let's see what they have.
So this is another pretty big match where you've got an 0-3 against a 3-0. So it has big playoff implications for Ifro, whether he makes it. Also, for people in the hunt, you actually at some point want the winner to keep winning. And then of course Kai still is very live, but he's got to start by winning this week.
Yeah, we've only gone through a third of our matches. In fact, it's only a third now that we've just had that last match. So there's still a
Yeah.
lot more to go.
And
Kai
now
has
Kai with the incredibly
exceedingly
gaudy
impressive
stats.
record. He has, I mean, 541 lifetime pro points.
Yeah.
Ifro might not be
Also,
Kai's numbers, but still extremely impressive.
yeah,
Extremely impressive
both these guys
numbers.
have incredible stats. I mean, Kai's incredible stats compared to everyone, and Ifro has
Yeah,
just incredible stats in general as well. So
Kai has
he's
a very exciting hand featuring omniscience.
he's got omniscience in his hand. I like to call it omniscience, even though I know that's not how the how it's said.
Well,
It,
it's every science. It's all science.
Ifro's hand looks suspiciously mono brown there. I
Uh, I can't see it on account of the. Oh, all right. Ifro is on workshops. Good, good, good. So my prediction is not incorrect. Okay, good.
so and Kai is unfortunately going to have to mulligan here. I mean, given he's got a 7 card hand that has no mana sources, though he does have double Force of Will.
It's a very good hand, but not the sort you can go around keeping. Now he's mulliganed into a 5 card hand.
Yes.
But if he keeps this, normally Mental Misstep is an abysmal card against workshop decks, but Ifro has the one thing that you want to hit. That is to say, Soul Ring.
Yeah, and there's a decent chance he gets a chance to because I think a lot of Ifro's play here normally would be cast Soul Ring, cast Chalice for 1, potentially cast
Right.
Chalice for 2. Kai did choose to mulligan this hand though, or that hand though. I can't imagine he mulligans this. Luckily, he's on the play, so
Yeah.
he
This
gets
is
to
a
start
very
casting
solid
his one
hand,
drop.
though.
It is. Not knowing what he's up against is a huge drawback here because I can imagine, cracking Scalding Tarn for Underground Sea and casting Preordain and then getting like, Chalice then Wastelanded and he won't
Yeah.
necessarily know that he needs to keep like land on top, but this is still a very good 5 card hand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, do you think he'd do you think he'd play land and pass? That would leave him the option of brainstorming, untapping it on his upkeep, vamping to find something, shuffling away 2 cards with brainstorm.
I think if you knew you were playing against workshops, you would just go land pass because it keeps your options open depending on what they
Right.
play. But given that in the dark, I would probably lead with Preordain because it gives you a lot more information about what you should be brainstorming and vampiric tutoring for, especially in a deck that has the 2 card combo of Show and Tell Omniscience. If you hit one off a Preordain, it lets you know what to vamp for. Here he already has the Omniscience, but then he
That's
could vamp
true.
for like
So if he
Lotus or
finds show
something.
and tell, he could vamp for, say, Black Lotus.
Yeah. And here he found Forbidden Orchard, so that that'll naturally lead to maybe vamping for Oath in a turn or two, assuming one casting cost spells are still legal to play, which
It might
they
not be a
probably
good
won't
time
be.
for 1 mana spells, but Ifro has a pretty solid start here. You can get that Soul Ring out, get a Chalice on 1, and these workshop decks are built around that card, the namesake Mishra's Workshop, and they're predicated on being able to eschew colored spells in order to have extremely powerful cards that are artifacts. And in particular, a Mishra's Workshop is essentially a Black Lotus that doesn't go to the graveyard when you use it.
Yeah. And this is a pretty awesome situation for Ifro where even if Kai had a Forcible to stop this Chalice, Ifro would just be able to play another Chalice on 1.
Right. Now,
The question now is, do you play Chalice on 0? I think
I
that
like that play. I like that play because the Underground Sea indicates that Kai is either on a big blue deck or a storm combo deck. So, something that's trying to cast a lot of powerful spells. And I think that makes the value of Chalice at 0 higher. In addition, this sort of deck, the sort that Ifro is playing, itself plays a lot of 2 drops. So a Chalice at 2 is going to hurt Ifro a lot more than a Chalice at 0.
yeah, Ifro decided it looks like Ifro's wanting to play a Chalice for 2 here. Because if you pass without playing Chalice, that is of course what he's aiming towards. I guess he figured, correctly that Kai would have played any zero drops if he had them in his opening hand.
That's true.
But
Um,
Ifro's hand has a 5 drop and a single wire, so I could definitely see him in a situation where he's not able to do that. Of course, if Kai just draws Oath of Druids here, he might just win the game, but instead he drew
easily
another
could.
1 drop.
Um, or Ifra was cleverly playing around the zero drop on top of his library. That was powerful.
Yeah.
So this sort of shop deck is called Martello shops, um, and
Did
it's
did Tom
it,
Martell have a hand in developing it? Is that what
he
the
did not. I believe it was designed by the Farino brothers, um, Raph and Vinny. Those are two brothers in New York who've done so much to innovate the workshop archetype. Um, and they've come up with a lot of the builds of workshop that people are used to seeing.
Yeah.
So this build is trying to leverage uh, Forge Master. Forge Master is an Iron Root Treefolk, except he has this Tinker ability built in. And the whole point of this deck is to hold off your opponent for a while and get enough time to activate Forge Master. It
And
doesn't have as many lock pieces as Terra Nova. That was the one that we saw Chris playing
that
last season.
that has like null rod and more spheres, whereas
Right. This doesn't have Nullrod, and it often plays 7 spheres. Um, but it has a lot more high impact cards like Forge Master.
and here you see that Ifro, by waiting a turn on the Chalice, it really paid off. Mainly because he was able to play Chalice for 2, which stops Oath of Druids, which is the one card he can really lose to here.
Right. At this point, he's in really good shape.
Yeah, I don't think Kai can win here, because
It
Tangle Wire plus Strip Mine plus Godotha Forge Master means that he doesn't really have time to play anything.
he could right. I think he would need to have what. I can't actually think of a sequence that will get him out of this. He needs to be able to play
Yeah.
Show and Tell and get the Omniscience down, but that's not going to do it either.
Well, he would have to draw Black Lotus, Show and Tell, but then he'd play Omniscience, and Chalice for 1 actually still stops all the spells he can
Right,
play.
right. And so once Forge Master becomes active, the game generally ends. There's
Yeah.
probably a Sundering Titan in there, which can take
Sometimes
a
I've seen Blightsteel Colossus as well.
I've seen it. I so I actually played this deck. I played Martello in a sanctioned tournament on Sunday. I went 2-2 with it. Um, it's I'll admit it's sort of outside of my comfort zone as far as decks go, but it's an extremely powerful deck. And even though it basically plays by portal rules, where there aren't any instants, and you just sort of F6 through your opponent's turn most of the time, it involves a lot of decisions.
Yeah. Then the main decision we saw this game was whether to play Chalice on 0 or 2. Ultimately, it ended up not mattering because Kai didn't draw any 2 drops or 0 drops, but it was an
Right.
interesting decision nonetheless. Here, we're going to see Kodotha Forge Master end the game, but honestly, that could have been almost anything, given that Kai is not really in a position to play any spells.
Yeah, yeah. It's important to note that Chalice and Sphere still both affect cards cast under Omniscience.
Yeah. As someone who plays a decent amount of combo, I generally like playing against this version more than playing against Terra Nova because there's less
Hmm.
restriction on your mana and what you can play. But what the Forge Master does is makes the deck much more explosive and powerful and finish the games faster. So it's certainly better against, creature-based decks or dredge decks or anything mid-rangey.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that ends the game. The game was, yeah, Sundering Titan arrived.
I mean, at that point, I think Ifro probably could have gotten a sphere if you really, really wanted to, or a lodestone golem. But either way, it was, there wasn't a whole lot Kai could do there. He did mold a 5, and Chalice shut off 3 of the 6 spells he drew that game. So that
it's
was going to be
true.
a tough game
It's
for him.
true. I think last round in the VSO we saw a lack of workshops, and one of the things that I saw on the mana drain, a lot of people were posting that. Well, this is what happens when you don't have anyone playing Workshop. You have people running around belching each other, and you have a lot of combo decks running rampant. And I'm not surprised that people are in Workshops this round because it's such a good answer to so much of what we saw last round.
Yeah. And I think that if you look at the lists, at least the ones that I've played, I have a healthy respect for workshops. All of my decks have like 7 workshop sideboard cards
Oh yeah.
because even though people haven't shown up with them, I knew that they would be great against me. So I was always very concerned about, the prospect of facing
I
workshops.
think you have to. I think that realistically, if you want to be successful with a vintage deck, you have to have a plan against workshops. And if you look even at those Belcher lists from last round, they had Leyline of Anticipation and Mishra's Workshop itself to try to get around those decks because the main deck of Belcher actually can't win with a Chalice of the Void on 0 or a Sphere. It can't get
Yep.
around either of those cards.
Yeah, and I think that even though there haven't been as many shops present, the people are playing decks that respect them. The other thing is, what exactly are you using your sideboard for in Vintage? I mean, you can't sideboard very many cards against Delver or Blue decks just because there aren't that many specific hate cards. So once I put in, Shops Hate and Dredge Hate, I usually still have enough room to fit all the other cards I want.
Yeah, I agree. Part of the difficulty of crafting a vintage deck is there are a lot of very powerful strategies. And how do you counter those? There's Dredge, there's Oath, there's Belcher now, there's Storm. And so all of these decks are more or less fragile, but at the same time, the hate against Oath isn't going to stop, say, workshops. And so you have to figure out how you're going to address all of those decks.
Yeah, Grafdigger's Cage has gone a long way for me. It's essentially 8 sideboard slots in that it's good against Oath and it's good against Dredge. So looks like game 2 started, so we're gonna hop down to the match.
All right. Here we have Kai with Emrakul and Time Walk. So he basically has 2 Time Walks in his hand. And he has Beseiju, who shelters all, which would make his spells uncounterable. And Ifro has an extremely powerful opening hand there. He has Lotus and also a land that's just better than Black Lotus in this deck.
Yeah. Kai shipped that first hand, given that he would have to go Forbidden Orchard Preordain and not really have a second land besides Beseiju. Makes sense. Now he can at least go Scalding Tarn into a basic island to cast Preordain, though he's still got that Emrakul hanging out there.
Right, the Emrakul's still there. He's probably there, so you can show and tell Emrakul into play. You can also, once you become omniscient, cast Emrakul, and then when you cast him for 0, instead of his usual 15 mana, you can also take a bonus turn.
Yeah. So Kai is not concerned with Wasteland. He just gets Volcanic Island here.
Yeah, I mean, it suggests he really wants red, which probably indicates that he has maybe some Ingot Chewers, probably some Ancient Grudges. So Ifro has a couple plays here. He can run out the
Yeah,
creature.
basically he can stop 2 mana from Kai, whether it's Wasteland, Lotus, Thorn, or Thorn, Lotus, Metamorph the Thorn. So he's got 2 different methods to cut down on Kai's mana.
Right. Now I like the flexibility there of keeping the Metamorph because now I don't so Show and Tell is the card here, and if Kai shows and tells and takes another turn, then he just wins. But if Kai shows and tells, Ifro can put in his own Tinker Robot, his Forge Master, and on his turn, the deck has Duplicant in it. So he's going to be able to use the Forge Master to find Duplicant and build his very own 15/15 while depriving Kai of that card.
Yeah, and to be clear, the way Kai takes an extra turn with Show and Tell is Show and Tell and Omniscience, cast Emrakul via Omniscience. If he just shows Emrakul in, Ifro does get a turn. So Ifro drew a Chalice, which is pretty nice here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but it's also worth noting that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a Show and Tell where Kai puts in Emrakul and Ifro puts in his clone would not actually let Ifro clone the Emrakul.
That is correct. Yeah, if they both come in at the same time, and the clone has to see something other than that. So
Right.
Kai Kai is getting locked out pretty effectively here. He's got the Oath. If he can cast it, he's presumably in good shape, but double Thorn of Amethyst does hurt.
Now there's a powerful card, and so you might be wondering, why are we playing Ingot Chewer as our shadow effect of choice? And this is why.
This is exactly why.
Ingot Chewer has better things to do than get countered by Chalice at 1. He's also not concerned with Thorns because even though he plays like a 1-mana sorcery, he's actually a creature.
Yeah, so Ingot Chewer can go munch on presumably one of the Thorns here. Which leaves Kai mana away from getting an Oath. Though Ifro is going to be able to play Kodotha Forge Master next turn, so we have to see what he ends up Forge Mastering out.
That Forge Master is almost always game over when it arrives. I mean,
when you untap with it, yeah.
Right. It sort of win the game with suspend 1 for 5 mana.
Oof.
And
that was a draw.
that was. A strip mine here would further take out Kai's ability to function. Now, it would set Ifro back a turn if he strip mines a land, but even if Kai drew a land, he's just going to get right back to where he was.
Yeah, you don't lose anything by doing this, and you have the possibility of huge gains, which I think are going to be realized here.
And if Kai doesn't make out... Kai did draw a land, so that's good for him. But he's still unable to do anything. He needs 1 more mana to cast the Oath, and there's a Wasteland.
So we're seeing the same thing happen over and over again, but either way, Kai keeps drawing lands. I mean, this is what he needs to do to be in it.
Fetch land is extremely good there. Fetch land is an unwastable land, and no one in Vintage plays Stifle. So a Wasteland or Strip Mine can't get that. But now all the hard work of that land is being undone by the Sphere.
Yeah.
And we see this Ancient Grudge costing too much mana.
Yeah.
And you'll note that even though Ifro could have slammed down his game-winning card earlier, he's choosing to keep Kai off land. And what you see in this game, and what you see in so many games involving Mishra's Workshop, is that the Workshop player keeps the opponent just 1 mana away from being able to win. It's often by just the smallest of margins.
Well, Kai did draw Ingot Chewer here, so
Kai drew Ingot Chewer, but he can't really use this Ingot Chewer to dig himself out of this. He has to use this Ingot Chewer to answer this Ironroot Treefolk. If he doesn't, he's just going to lose on the next turn. So even in this way, Ifro deploying that threat is serving to keep Kai from being able to come out from under the water here. Yeah,
and I mean, it came down to Ifro having the second Forge Master in exactly as many spheres and thorns as he did. If he had missed 1 or 2 times, or on like the Wastelands, Kai might be in okay shape here. But as is, Kai, I don't think really has much. He can just draw another Ingot Chewer and then draw a land and then draw a land.
Kai is, well, he's, one way I like to think about this is Kai has 2 mana, but really it's 2-2, which is no mana available.
Yeah. Yeah, he needed to roll off a 3rd Ingot Chewer there. Instead, he's going to get Forge Master, presumably for Sundering Titan just immediately, make sure Kai can never play another spell this game.
I like that. I think you want to keep the spheres on the table and get Sundering Titan. And fortunately, Chalice will help you do that. And remember that Mishra's Factory can become an artifact, so you can sacrifice that to your Forge Master. In fact, it probably makes sense to play the Chalice at, well, Chalice at 0 costs 2.
Yeah, I mean, you could play Duplicant and Chalice here. You have exactly enough, I believe. Then you wouldn't be able to activate Factory, though.
The Workshop.
Yeah. Either way, Ifro's got excess artifacts that he doesn't need here.
Right.
And so he's going to end up with enough to Forge Master again and leave all his spheres and whatnot in play, or at least most of them.
Yeah, I think this is going to end the game.
My guess is just the Chalices, leave all the spheres, get a Sundering Titan, and then you actually just have lethal by attacking next turn, and Kai, there's no card in Magic that can save him there.
And this is over. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's That's Mishra's Workshop, and that's what it does against Dominoes.
Well, I mean, he made sure Kai could never resolve a relevant spell, and that's pretty much what happened.
Right, right. It's a pattern we see repeatedly. Mishra's Workshop is it's an archetype that's done extremely well for literally decades in Vintage,
Yeah,
and that's why.
and it's good seeing workshops here. I personally don't play workshops very often, but I don't fault those who do.
Like I said, I played it last Sunday. It was difficult to play. It was difficult to sideboard with, and it plays very differently than blue decks, but it's an extremely powerful approach.
It is, it is. And then so looking at our next match here, we have a rematch of the finals of last year's Vintage Super League. I'm playing Steve Menendian, which
Uh,
curious to see what Steve brought here.
I'm curious to see what you brought here. I know you
Well,
already
I already
know.
know what I brought here, so I'm less curious about that.
I'm looking forward to watching this match.
Yeah, and we'll see if my predictions were accurate, and even if accurate, see if they help me at all. There'll be no way of knowing.
Well, I would ask you your predictions, but I don't want to tip your hand at all here. So I'll.
Well, I'll go on record and say that I thought the deck Steve was most likely to play was either like a Delver or Mentor deck, like a Gush, creature aggro deck. But that doesn't mean I think it's an overwhelming favorite versus every other deck that exists, because Steve has shown a wide range.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm looking forward to watching this match very much.
Yeah, and after that we've got you're matched up against Bob. We have Chris against Randy. I wonder if
Right?
that's going to be the Blue Belcher mirror, and then we're gonna close things out with Dave in his second match of the night. Though he played the other one earlier. Dave against Tom Martell.
Right. I hope that Bob doesn't beat me, but if he does, I hope it involves Dark Confidant again, because that's really the best way you can lose to Bob.
Yeah, that was an impressive match last time. So
I can't even complain about it. His avatar arrived on the battlefield and dispatched me pretty quickly.
yes, it did. All right, so it looks like we're going to take a quick break. We're going to get things set up for our next round, including myself.
All right. Well, good luck, Louise.